Okay, well, welcome everybody. Good morning. And I don't exactly have visibility as to how many people we already have live with us, but we want to be very mindful of your time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ewandro Magalhães. I am the Chief Language Officer at KUDO, and I'm a conference interpreter. So the reason we're all here today is to celebrate International Translation Day. So I have with me today two distinguished panelists and two people whom I've come to become attached to pretty much and who I've come to respect greatly. One is Giovanna Lester, my good friend from Brazil. We go back a long way. Giovanna will introduce herself in a minute, but I can tell you that she's extraordinary in everything she does. She is a translator and interpreter. She is joining us today from Miami, Florida. And I also have with us today Sarah Hickey from Nimdzi Insights. Sarah is also a researcher, an interpreter, and someone who's going to be sharing interesting insights regarding the present, the current affairs of our profession. So basically, I'm going to be talking about the past. Sarah is going to be talking about the present, and Gio is going to be talking about the future. So each of us is going to be making a small presentation, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And then at the end, we're going to open for questions. We would love for you to join us and participate actively. So be prepared to show your face or to send your questions in writing, and we'll go from there. So can we have that little slide, Sean Tucker, just for the translation? I'm sorry, the Twitter handles. So feel free to tweet about this. We are trying to get this also pushed to the KUDO Twitter page and Facebook page, but the handles for each one of us are already shown on screen. So feel free to quote us and to put in a good word, or send us questions. We'll be happy to revisit this. So enough about me. Without further ado, let me give you, Giovanna, the floor for a very quick introduction, and then straight to you after that, Sarah, so we can get started. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Evandro. Tucker, you're doing a great job over there. Not too fast, not too slow. Perfect. Thank you, Nimdzi and MultiLingual, for this opportunity. I am Gio Lester, the president of the Brazilian Association of Translators and Interpreters, a 47-year-old institution down in Brazil, bringing together translators, interpreters, sign language interpreters to localizers and everybody who works with languages with the goal of bringing the world together. And I'm here helping them achieve that. This is my turn, which ends next year. And we are holding our credentialing exam this year. If you go to our website, abrates.com.br, if you look for us, ABRATES, you'll find more information if Portuguese is one of your languages. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Hickey. I'm the VP of Research at Nimdzi Insights, but my career started long ago, first in journalism, then translation, and then I did my master's in conference interpreting. So the whole area of conference interpreting is still kind of my home turf, very close to my heart. And this is how I started at Nimdzi as well, as the interpreting expert before branching out into other areas of the language industry as well. But still to this day, anything to do with interpreting is what I look at Nimdzi. And so assessing the market and the trends is basically my bread and butter now. And in my private time, I'm still also very much involved with the interpreting community. I'm part of an interpreting podcast, for example, The Troublesome Terps. Some of you may know it. I was graciously invited by the existing hosts about 2 years ago at this stage. So yeah, interpreting is basically most of what I do. I feel like I can talk about it all day and also in my sleep. So I'm very happy to be here today and talk to all of you about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, both of you. So a little word about KUDO, guys, and then we're going to jump right in. We're doing this to celebrate interpreters. We're doing this to celebrate you guys. So we would love to hear from you at the end of this. KUDO prides itself on being a very interpreter-centric platform. So we want the interpreters to tell us exactly what they would like done, how they would like done, and our job is to provide the best platform so that they can continue to do what they do best, which is to interpret, so to do a stellar job. Now, that said, we would love to hear from you if you are a conference interpreter. KUDO has an online program to certify interpreters, and by that I mean to make sure that you know how to work on KUDO. We're not certifying you to your ability to interpret, but we would love to have you, be proficient in the use of the platform. We call that KUDO certification. And we're also trying to get as many KUDO Pro interpreters as possible. And why is that? Because we have a new system called KUDO Marketplace, where you can go online, check your availability, sit there, and have offers of work be sent your way. The rates are good. They're very decent. We try to equalize rates around the world. And it's like having an agency 24/7 looking for events for you, telling you where to go, giving you the preparation materials that you need. And the prerequisite to actually be on KUDO Marketplace is that you be a KUDO, a pro interpreter. So reach out to KUDO. There are many ways to do so, or to me specifically, and we'll be happy to let you know how to become one. Okay, so Tucker, if I could have my second slide, let's get started. This is very exciting. This is a subject that's very dear to my heart. So I'm going to be talking to you about what I call the legacy of Jerome. Because as you know, International Translation Day is something that we celebrate in tribute to Saint Jerome, and we're going to, again, look into, what the reasons for that are. Saint Jerome, as we know, is the patron saint of translators and interpreters, and someone, again, that we celebrate on this day. But the idea is to go back and to, again, refresh your memory. Those of you who may have heard the name and may not know exactly why it is that we attach this date in our profession to Jerome, and tell you a little bit of the story. It's a story that I love because it goes beyond just translation and interpretation. It's a story of intrigue. It's kind of cloak and dagger kind of approach and so on. There are many interesting aspects to it. So I hope you will find it as interesting as I do. So let's see what the legacy of Jerome really is. My next slide, please, Tucker. So here is the man, Saint Jerome, right? Jerome was actually a scholar, a theologist, and someone who spent his life learning languages so that he could later put that to good use in translating the Bible. So at a certain point, he was commissioned from Pope Damasus to actually provide us with a Latin version of the Bible. So let's move on, Tucker, to our next slide. Okay, so most of you know Jerome as the guy who translated the Bible into Latin, and that's the work called the Vulgate. Now, you have to stop at a moment here and ask yourselves, okay, what's the big deal into translating a book into a different language? Don't we all do this all the time? And haven't we all done this in the past and so on? But it is a huge undertaking because, again, if you think of what the Bible is, it's a collection of, 66 books, many of which written in Hebrew and then later translated into the Greek and the Septuagint. And with the New Testament now following the coming of Christ, coming to light, at this point in time, this is 383 Anno Domini, the New Testament is still taking shape. It's still being drafted. It's in the final phases of being put together. And there's a new force on the horizon, and that's Christianity. And that's a big deal because up until that point, kings and queens, they were kind of ordained by God, and they had a sword over everybody's head, right? They held the key to heaven and hell. They would dictate whether you would spend your life as a slave or as anything else for the entirety of your years. Now, with the advent of Christ and Christianity and so on, there's a new promise on the horizon, and that is that religion and heaven and everything else is now within reach of the common man. So by repenting on your sins and so on, you can actually, there's a fast track to heaven now. So this is bringing religion closer to the common man and women. And it's a very revolutionary, story, because it changes the power, it shifts the power considerably. So let's see, however, what's happening at that point in time when this when this started to be discussed. So when we talk about the world back then, we talk about Rome, right? Have you heard the saying that every road leads to Rome?
Yep.
Well, that was not figurative. That was actually very literal, because Rome was the world. Anywhere you got, that was Rome. So if you travel 4,000 miles and you found yourself in a different place, that was Rome. So Rome was everywhere. It was all that was. But at this point in time, the Roman Empire was getting divided. There was a big crisis, right? Upon the death of Theodosius I, it got divided into Western and Eastern Roman Empire, and Christianity was again coming to the fore, and there were forces against and in favor of Christianity, and there was a lot being discussed and a lot being debated. So it was the perfect point in time to actually come forward with a new version of a book that talks about Christianity and make it available to the ordinary man. And that's exactly the work that was commissioned from Jerome. Okay, not only was he supposed to translate the Bible into Latin, but in so doing, make it closer in style to the language spoken out there on the streets, right? So that hence the name Vulgate. So it comes from vulgus, so vulgo, right, in Portuguese at least, which is making it closer to a more quote unquote vulgar use of the language, not vulgar in a negative sense, but a more popular use of the language. So the idea being, let's disseminate this to as many people as possible so that we can give more power to this new force on the horizon, which is now the Catholic Church, which was going to be for the next 1,000 years the most powerful institution on the planet, the biggest owner of real estate, and again somebody who now had a sword over the heads of kings and queens, and who could again eventually even sell indulgences to them, as it was the case in a few centuries after that. So we have now Jerome busy translating the Vulgate and so on. But the most important thing, guys, is that we're talking about not just linguists, fighting for the next gig. These are not interpreters trying to see who's going to, interpret the next speech by President Biden or Obama on TV. These guys are not deep down linguists. These guys are political animals fighting for the next big job. And the next big job at that point in time, the big ticket was to become a pope. So if you were able to determine your erudition and your knowledge in the matters of the church, you had a very good chance of landing that job, which responds only to God, has a number of perks, is an immediate road to the heavens, and again gives you absolute power for your entire life. It ends when you die. So that's the big ticket. Now, failing that, if you cannot be pope, then the next big thing is to find a way of becoming a saint. So here you have a lot of guys trying to ascertain themselves as the new leader, as someone who understands everything about Christianity, what is a sin, what is not a sin, and so on, and trying to dictate what is going to be the rule for the next years there. Now, in so doing, of course, these guys are also academics, right? These are the theologists, people who are writing on a regular basis. Some of them have thousands of pieces of writing on religious matters and so on. And this is true still today, guys, they had their divergences, right? One thing is right, the other one thinks the colleague is wrong, and so on. And they started, of course, exchanging those views, and not in the most polite way. So at a certain point, a huge point of controversy started to be discussed, and that was whether people should espouse the ideas of another theologist called Origens, which at this point, when Christianity is now gaining force, starts to be looked upon as some sort of a heretic. And then now you have people looking at those writings and so on and finding fault with it. Now, the real reason why we talk about Jerome as the patron saint of translation doesn't have to do with his ability as a translator per se. It has to do with that intrigue where, in the fight for relevance, in the fight for significance, in the fight where they wanted to establish themselves as the next big thing, and kind of lining up for this job offer that was in the market, they started attacking one another on what they were trying to do, which is write and translate the pieces of religious writings out there. So the whole thing has to do, in the case of Jerome, with a letter. And this is why I have to ask you, have you heard about the letter to Pammachius? Because when you talk about why Jerome is the patron saint of translators, you have to know what the letter to Pammachius is. Because this is the very letter where Jerome says, translation is not replacing word for word. Translation is rendering sense for sense. Right? And that's what we attach everything to. And that's why Jerome is the patron saint of translators. But let me give you the story. The letter to Pammachius is a defense. It's a legal defense. It's Jerome reaching out to a friend that he had in high places, a senator, a Roman senator called Pammachius, to defend himself against attacks that he was suffering from another translator called Rufinus. And why is
Ewandro, can you give me a second? People are having a hard time hearing you. Could you up your gain?
Okay. Is that better?
You.
I'll bring my microphone into the picture.
I've been trying to bring you up here, Ewandro, but I can only do so much.
Is that?
Yeah, talking.
How about that?
Perfect.
Is that better now?
It's looking.
I'll monitor the chat here, but I can hear you better.
Yeah, me too.
Everybody? Sorry, guys. Okay, I'll wait another minute and then I'll go.
I think we're good to go. Go for it, Ewandro.
Okay, great. Sorry, guys, about
We'll fix this in post.
I have this big microphone in front of me. I thought it was doing the jump. So, again, origins, right? Origin. So, a guy, Epiphanius, right, who was later going to be a bishop, and in the letters that I've seen, Jerome even mentions him as a pope. Epiphanius wrote a letter to a bishop called John, finding fault with him because he was espousing the ideas of origin. At a certain point, he also wrote another letter saying, some sort of an apology, half apology, trying to, again, be on the good side of this bishop and so on, but again, calling him to penitence, right? Because the ideas that were in the letter and so on. Now, this is an intrigue, guys, right? Okay, let me write a letter to this guy to find fault with what he's doing. This is a heretic view of religion and so on. At the same time, let me ask Jerome, a friend of mine, to translate this into Latin. And again, trying to dumb it down to the level that people can understand so that I can circulate this letter to more people. And again, in under the pretense of saying, okay, here's, I'm reaching out to you and we want to be good, under the pretense of doing that, disseminating to as many people as possible, the notion that these guys are not on our side, right? Halfway into it, again, when they realized that this letter was circulating and so on, and that Jerome was working on the translation, this guy, Rufinus, heard of it and actually put together some sort of a plot, and they were able to get the letter before it reached out, and then kind of stole the letter from Jerome, and then said, "Oh, okay, so Jerome is writing this letter and so on, but do you know who Jerome is? Jerome is a bad translator. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't trust this translation because this guy is the same guy who, by the way, in translating the scriptures, did this and this and this and this and this, right?" And they were, again, kind of bad-mouthing Jerome on the basis of this guy doesn't know how to translate. He's a bad translator. Don't trust anything he says, right? In order to, okay, don't give credence to anything that this guy is saying. Now, Jerome is vilified, and then he writes to the Roman senator Pammachius to say, hey, see what they're saying about me? You know Greek and you know Latin and so on. This is not true. This is not nice. I trust that she will help me, rectify the record and render this for what it is. So he writes to the senator, Tomachus, not because he wants to write a treatise on translation, but because he wants to set the record straight. So that's the whole intrigue and so on. And the conversation goes on, and they start still, Rufinus and Jerome exchanging letters and fighting over stuff and so on. And the funny thing is that Jerome was really, really mad that Rufinus had kind of stolen the letter and used the letter. So, but a few years later, he does the same thing to Rufinus. He actually steals a piece of writing from Rufinus and does the exact same thing. He goes about, bad mouthing the guy and so on. Again, I want you to understand that this is not linguists talking about language. These are guys talking about, how do I keep relevant? How do I keep my significance? How do I trump you as the ideal candidate for the job that's out there on the market? So that's the context in which we should look at this letter. Now, I invite you to look at the letter anyhow, because it's a beautiful piece of writing. It's a beautiful letter where Jerome quotes several points in the scripture where even the apostles, when quoting scripture, made a few mistakes, but that does not detract from the fact, from the message that they were sharing. So, and then he says, okay, maybe instead of saying distinguished gentleman, I said, dear sir. What difference does that make? Maybe I may have misquoted a point in the scriptures here and there, but does that make me a malicious translator? Does that make me someone who's trying to corrupt the message of the Gospels? Not at all, right? So again, it's a very beautiful legal defense, and written, at least the English version that I saw, written in very beautiful prose. So I invite you to look for the letter. It's letter number 57. If you Google it, Jerome letters, letter 57, you're going to find that document, and I invite you to read the entire thing. So let me get my next slide, Turka. Guys, I'm almost done. Don't worry too much. Okay. Okay, so carry on. We can go forward. So this is, again, Origin and those guys. You can get me the next slide.
He had a tattoo. Cool.
I was just thinking that too.
But the thing is, if you go back here, so there you have them. So
He looks pretty cool.
Jerome, again, a modern rendition of Jerome and so on. Again, somebody we celebrate because in the process of doing whatever he did for the reasons that were dear to him and so on, and you can take issue with that, with those reasons. You can take issue with the fact that Jerome was no saint. He was doing he was engaging in the same wrongdoing and the same bad mouthing and the same intrigue and gossiping as anybody else in that day. He was not a people person. He walked around with a stone, either to punish himself or maybe cast a stone on someone. Again, not a very friendly guy, but someone who, in the process of doing this monumental job of translating the Bible, had to not only perfect his Greek, but also go back and learn Hebrew. So it's something that took him 14 years. And guys, this is in a day where Google Translate is not around. There are no dictionaries. You have to go to the desert and maybe surround yourself with a few trusted advisors, but there's no, it's not an easy task. So again, who had a lot of passion for the language and who in the process of writing this new text in Latin kind of discovered many things that are important as you translate and drew attention to it. So somebody that we quite rightly celebrate as the patron saint of translators, but somebody whom I at least credit with having created a lot of bad blood and some of the negativity that we still see out there in the profession. And here's where I want to leave you with a message. There's a legacy to what Jerome did, right? And still, if you fast forward 16 centuries and you come to this present moment, you still see a lot of bickering out there. You still see a lot of quarreling out there where interpreters and translators and so on are always comparing themselves to to a colleague or to the next big thing and so on, and finding out there's a lot of fault finding in what we do as translators and as interpreters and so on. And again, part of it is because, again, you are attacked and you attack back and you try to find, to reconcile and so on. But part of it is also because it's how the stage has been set. And I want to end with a quote by Albert Einstein. Again, he is remarked to have noted to a journalist, and I don't know if this story is true or not. I couldn't find any actual references to the fact, but this is sold as a story that comes from Einstein. But in any event, the message is what matters here. Einstein is quoted or remarked to have been asked by a journalist, what is the most important question mankind can ask? And what would be the answer? Supposedly, allegedly, he took 10 minutes to answer that question. And at the end of those 10 minutes, he said, the most important question you can ask is the universe a friendly place? How so? Again, everybody was expecting some sort of, formula to come out of it or some very specific scientific question. And he explained himself in this way. He said, if you believe you live in a friendly universe, you will be busy trying to build bridges. But if you believe that you live in a hostile universe, you will be busy building up walls and dividing the space to protect yourself. And that's a choice. So the choice that we all have as translators, as interpreters, as we go forward, as the landscape changes, as we try to protect our markets, and as we look at what other people are doing and so on, a question we have to ask ourselves is, are we dealing with a hostile market? Are we dealing with a friendly universe? Are we dealing with a place where there is room for reconciliation, where there is room for building bridges, or the other way around? So that's the reflection I want to leave with you guys. Again, it was a bit all over the place because halfway into this, I lost access to my presentations. I had to recover part of it just from memory, if you will. So I'll stop here. Glad to answer any questions that you might have in the end. And with that, I'll give you the floor, Sarah, so that you can now tell us what the present state of affairs is in translation and interpretation. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That is quite the act to follow, Ewandro, and especially with such a great question and takeaway at the end. And yeah, I don't have any presentation at all. I'm only just back from vacation. And so I'm going to freestyle this a little bit. But like I said, this is what I do all day. So coming back a little bit to whether the universe is a friendly place or not, just a small remark. That is, of course, not a question I want to answer, but I just wanted to add that I think the language industry is a very friendly place. Most of us that come here once stay here forever. And one thing that I personally really like about interpreting, especially, well, I'm a trained conference interpreter, is that, well, interpreters rarely come alone, usually work in pairs. And so that there at least cooperation is encouraged, if not a prerequisite really for success. So I think that is something very wonderful. I predominantly want to talk a little bit about the current state of the interpreting market, because that is also what I'm working on right now. You may have seen our latest ranking just came out under the name the Nimdzi Interpreting Index. We ranked the top 35 largest providers by revenue in the global interpreting market. And there's a little introduction there as well to what the data that we've gathered are telling us about the current state of the market. So to back up a little bit, of course, interpreting, to no surprise for anyone here, I feel like I don't even need to mention it, but I'm going to highlight it anyway. And that is that 2020 really was a year like no other before. Not just for us in the language industry, of course, but just for the entire world. At least in our lifetime, we have never experienced anything like it. And so more or less life as we knew it came to a halt. And we still don't know if it's ever going to be the way it was. I feel like arguably it won't be. It'll be different. And we're still in the midst of the pandemic. Things have improved arguably here and there, but we're still in it. And so last year was a challenge for everyone. But within the language industry, it was especially the interpreting market that was really heavily affected, both negatively and positively. So what do I mean by that? So I want to end on a high note, so I'm going to start with the negative impact first. And that is, I think, also the more obvious one, that once everything shut down, well, people weren't allowed to meet in person anymore. But before March 2020, most of the interpreting assignments in the different segments of the market were performed on-site. Of course, we've had remote solutions available for a very long time. But in most markets, and of course, this can vary from country to country, it was about a split of 80% on-site, 20% remote, again, with exceptions depending on where you're located. But then, more or less overnight, on-site went down to, well, you could say zero, or at least very, very close to zero. So suddenly everything pivoted to remote interpreting. And, well, some people were set up for that and others weren't. And you could really see this massive impact of that situation, because the ones who largely banked on on-site operations, who had either themselves resisted the move to remote, or where the clients weren't set up for remote, well, they were really heavily impacted and sometimes had revenue losses of up to 70%, had to let go of half of their staff. So really, really bad impact there. And then on the other side of the scale, you had the complete opposite. And that was that all the interpreting providers that already had remote solutions in place, and as well, of course, the technology providers in this space, also like KUDO and other platforms, well, they were really the big winners of the pandemic, if I can say it like that, from a business standpoint, of course. They really shot ahead and revenues went through the roof. We've had reports of revenue increases anywhere in between 140 and 700% staff increase of, I don't know how much. It's just been crazy figures coming our ways in that area. And we've also seen this reflected then in the amount of investment we've seen in the market. So on the one hand, if we're talking about the technology providers now, it already kicked off a little bit before the pandemic that back then Cloudbreak, now UpHealth, that have Marty, the platform, received 10 million in funding. Then KUDO, congratulations again, Ewandro, received 2 rounds of funding, 27 million in total, if I recall correctly. And not too long ago, this year as well, Interactio received 30 million in funding. So that is a big confirmation that not only do investors believe in remote interpreting and that and the technology behind it, but also the human-powered interpreting, so to speak. It's always a bit of a weird term to use because technically you'd think all of interpreting is human-powered. But of course, there's also an increase of machine interpreting coming in that I don't want to go into detail about now. But to me, this is a very big signal that this boom that we're experiencing right now is not going to just come to an abrupt end. Of course, it cannot continue in as much of a hockey stick growth curve as we've had. But I do believe that it is a very big confirmation of the need for multilingual meetings and just multilingual communication in general. And aside from the tech providers receiving investment, there's also been a bunch of private equity firms investing in some of the bigger providers like the Big Word or Seprotech. They received investment as well. So all in all, this is very much in line as well what we've already seen in the wider language industry, where basically M&A and investment has just gone through the roof. I feel like especially since the merger of RWS and SDL, that was just the mega deal in the industry. We've received news of new mergers and acquisitions and investments almost weekly. So all that is to say that even though last year was certainly a rough patch, mildly put, there's been good and there's been bad. And I firmly believe that we're coming out of this better than before. And I want to briefly explain why. So on the one hand, like I said, some companies, they had a dip, because they had on-site operations only. But once the pandemic hit and everything had to shift to remote, they were able to finally get their clients on board with remote operations. Then technology has advanced so much. On the one hand, of course, the ones that were already set up well, they fared well, but they didn't stop there either. New features were added. Then in the healthcare sector especially, there were integrations with telehealth platforms for interpreting services. If you're living in the United States, I've definitely seen pictures of these little tablets where you can request a video remote interpreter at the click of a button in all the vaccine centers there. Well, all the ones I've seen in pictures. I haven't seen all of them. So, but I think that's a good indicator. Then we've received new requests as well, where even we had requests like an esports company wanted to start doing RSI. And so this is telling me as well that the market is expanding. In addition, then a few other LSPs I talked to, they told me that not all of their previous on-site assignments pivoted to remote, but that they also received requests for adjacent services, I want to say. So, for example, captioning then for live meetings or more document translation. And all of those companies, they will keep those services post-pandemic. So what I'm trying to say is that even though the beginning was hard for some, a lot has come out of it. Companies are better set up now than they were before. They have new services. They have new modes of offering those services to their clients. They have become more customer-centric than ever before, which is a trend we're seeing across the globe anyway, and across all the different types of language services, that this is ever more central, that you need to really adjust your service offering specifically to the needs of your client. So in the end, we will come out of this much, much stronger. And last but not least, then this also ties in with this push for integrations with the large event platforms like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, because, well, in the beginning, I think maybe some of the virtual interpreting technology providers may have regarded them as some form of competition. But at this stage, what we're seeing is that everyone is looking to integrate to really catch a ride on that same wave, because same as in the interpreting space, also in just the whole rest of the world, everything pivoted to remote. And so, of course, these platforms have been booming as well, and it makes complete sense that interpreting is like joining them, basically. So I feel like I didn't wrap that up all that well, but I hope I left you with something good here. I realized I started to ramble after a while, but I'm going to leave you with this. Yeah, the last year wasn't the easiest, but I think it was, in the end, a really good change for the interpreting industry that will have brought us further than ever before. And watch out for the full analysis and report from the Nimdzi Interpreting Index that we will be publishing in the next few weeks. And there you can read all the trends in detail.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. This is very, very exciting. And I'm dying to see the analysis of the new interpreter landscape map. So without further ado, let me give you the floor, Gia, because I know you have a lot to share with us when it comes to how we should look at the future. So we've had a little bit of the past, all the bickering and the bad blood that was there. We're now going through a phase of big adjustments, as Sarah just let us know. And I would be curious to learn from you what you expect this profession to look in the future.
So I'm the oracle. Okay. Well, it's risky, but I've been practicing this all my life. When I was 5, I decided I wanted to be a teacher, which I did when I was 20. And if you remember, in 2016, I tried to get the companies that do online conferences, and that matrix then converted that into signals that went straight into the brain of the person who was receiving and decoding the message. Exactly. Until we get to a biotechnology point where we can have our thoughts turned into concepts and then transported to somebody else's brain, I don't think the machines will be able to fully grasp what's going on. Earlier this year, Waverly Labs of data presentation for AIC. They are the ones who came with the pilot. Remember that little in the ear bud thing? Yeah. Translation, language to speech. No, language to text, text to speech. Right. They have a new product now called the Ambassador, which instead of being in ear, it's outside of the ear. So Sergio Del Rey, the CEO, was talking to AIC and explaining how it works and everything. They have 3 modes. You can put like 4 telephones together, and each one will receive the message in a different language. Yes, it's really neat. And listen when it's passive. Let's say you're listening to a podcast and you put the thing in and you're going to listen to it in the language you choose. So that's one of the things, and that is the closest to what Douglas had imagined. And the closeness ends in the being in the ear point. That's it. Everything else is different. There is another technology that I like called ILA, Instant Language Assistant, created by Translate Live. Again, they did a presentation for AIC in the beginning of the year. And it's very cool because imagine you have like 2 cell phones connected back to back, and we are speaking. So whatever I say is going to appear written here and be translated to you. You're going to see it in the language you want and hear it in the language you want. That is cool. They also did something great. They went one step further. They have Braille, so the deaf can make use of that technology, according to Peter Hayes, who is the CEO of the company. I mean, and sign language interpreters, don't worry, you have those speaking gloves. They're still in development. First time I saw one, I believe, was like 2012. They're still working on that. But now we also have the avatars on websites. It's very common in Brazil. I haven't seen one in the US yet, but in Brazil, you have a little symbol on the website. You can click on it, and the little avatar will come up signing the contents of that website. I hear it's not perfect, but it is what is available at this moment. So the one thing that we have in our favor and that science fiction did not take into account is the standard agencies, ISO, ASTM, and BNT, CN. Sorry for the alphabet soup, those are all international, domestic, and regional standard organizations. Also, we need to think in terms of and be grateful for our professional associations. All these entities keep the human element top of mind and protect our interests. And that is very important when all these changes are taking place, because we can get lost in that shuffle. Too many changes happening, and we are not that visible as humans. Actually, our professions kind of regard us to the position of ghosts, just voices. We are not to be seen. Well, a lot of people disagree with that, and the landscape is changing. Some of you may know Jonathan Downey, Dr. Jonathan Downey. He wrote a book called Interpreters versus Machines, and there he says that all a tool can do is enhance the quality that an artist has. He's referring to the use of AI, artificial intelligence, in interpreting. And that's exactly, I believe, the goal. When in KUDO we use their assistance there, it helps us get information more readily. There are other companies that are using it, even in translation. They are using artificial intelligence, machine translation, to help us with the processes of getting information more readily. But still, it's us, the humans, who make the decision as to what term or word to use. Because it's not a matter of words, a matter of cultures, intention, connotation, and we master that better than any machine, at least that I know. There's a lot going on in the area of biolinguistics, but nothing that brings biolinguistics and technology together to help us. I don't see anything happening right now. But I'm grateful to Gene Roddenberry because it was the 23rd century that he depicted in Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie guy, sorry if you are not, but he created the ability of people, or he depicted the ability of people to understand each other readily. But on the spaceship, we had Lieutenant Uhura. She was a breakthrough role for female actresses or actors, if you prefer, but also for our profession, because it brought to the fore what we do in an unheard of setting. Now, the 23rd century, and they're still using humans to do that, to be in charge of the intra and interspecies communications. Yes, that was beautiful, and I love that. Now, does that tell us something? Yeah, I don't think we'll see a machine taking over the work we do, not least not in my lifetime. Recently, actually, I started using my husband's iPhone to help him communicate with me in Brazilian Portuguese. Yeah, after 30 years of marriage, his vocabulary is still 11 words. Frustrating? Yeah, it can be fun. So, at any rate, I started to use it with him, and he could see what I was saying and hear it. And he was like, oh my God, this is cool. Yes, it is very cool, but it's not a replacement for us. I did that as a snarky thing, you know. Then I realized it helped him communicate with the lady who comes to help us here in the house. She speaks Spanish and a very poor English. His Spanish is just a little better than his Portuguese, but only good for restaurants. Talk about stomach commanding the language center. Yeah, that's his reality. So they finally had a conversation for the first time. And that was cool to watch. But where are we going? I read what Mark Hauser and Robert Bertwick and Noam Chomsky had to say. And biolinguistics is nowhere near unraveling the mysteries of language acquisition. And I can't imagine that we'll be seeing a biotechnological process for decoding messages, human language specifically, anytime soon. But I want to leave you with a warning that Douglas put in his Hitchhiker's Guide. He said that the Babelfish was responsible for the bloodiest and worst wars imaginable. It may not make sense, but when you look at what happened to Jerome, we lost him too. All that gossiping going around. So, are we better than that? Are we going to make changes as human beings to prevent all that conflict from taking place? Sorry, still trip on my prepositions. Humans. So, yeah. So let's think into the future. There is a lot to happen, but I don't believe that machines are right there yet. to provide us with what we need. And I'll open now for questions. Ewandro, I give it back to you.
Thank you, Gio. Love it. I love the references to the things that most of you on the call will certainly recognize, right? The Hitchhiker's Guide and everything. But I didn't see any of that in Sarah's interpreting index or the map. Is it there? Because Nimdzi also has like a technology landscape map. I don't know exactly what the name is that you give it, where you show the different technologies in interpreting and so on. Is the Babel fish there? I guess you're muted, sir.
Yeah, people are complaining about the
I can't hear you, Sarah.
Sorry, yes, that was
No.
on my end. Apologies. So I was just saying that no, the Babelfish is not part of our language technology atlas, but we have many other machine interpreting technologies listed there.
Excellent, very good. Gio, one word that I want to pick from your speech, talking now about the future and so on, and Sarah's going to tell me to what extent that has been true in the past, is the word yet, right? Which is, I presume, an adverb, right? Is that an adverb? You're better at grammar than I am. So that adverb, yet, is the key here. When we say, "Oh, technology is not there," in the past, and I've been dealing with this for a long time now, where even with the UN, when I was still with ITU and so on, and I was trying to get everybody else to try what we were doing in the organization, which was then called remote participation. Every time I spoke to the non-converts, they would say, "Oh no, we can't do this because technology is not there." And I added the word yet. Well, technology is not there yet, and you did as well. Is that, are we leaving the door open somehow to a future where technology will solve that problem completely? Not maybe in our lifetime, not in the lifetime of those who are listening to us, but do you believe that technology will eventually catch up on the yet and provide a solution where a machine or a robot or some sort of a mixture, some sort of biotechnology solution may eventually be able to do what interpreters, human interpreters today do?
Well, I would say never, because I feel like technology has surprised us more than once already. I would agree that this is not exactly around the corner, but I think the more important question to ask as well is in what instances will it replace human interpreters, or in what use cases can it help also to break down language barriers in areas that are currently not covered by interpreting? So, Gio, your example of your husband finally speaking to the lady who comes to clean the house, or I don't know if someone is in a cab somewhere on vacation or needs to buy something in a supermarket. They're not going to call an interpreter. They probably don't even know how. So if in that case they have a device that can help them with the basic communication, I don't think anyone there is arguing that A, they're taking a job from an interpreter, or B, that the communication needs to be absolutely flawless. Yeah, it just needs to be communication, because there are instances where I would argue having some form of communication is better than no communication, which can also be true in the case of emergencies, especially then. Yeah, you need something very quick, and I'm sorry, then it's just no time for, do we have somebody certified and can they come down here? And it's like, it doesn't really matter. All
Yeah,
of this
you
goes
cannot
out the
ask
window.
the bacteria. You cannot ask the bacteria or the virus to stop for a moment.
Yeah.
Stop reproducing. Let me get somebody to help. No.
Yeah,
I
if
agree.
someone has a heart attack, I don't know where, and it's like, I'm sorry, can you wait? Yeah, like, please hold on. No, but just all jokes aside, I have been very skeptical in the beginning when it came to machine interpreting, but I've been very surprised by how many good solutions are already out there. Of course, they are not on par with humans, but the same can be said for machine translation, even though machine translation is already further ahead. But the point is that they are becoming good enough to fulfill certain use cases. And that is already the case today. But But I want to stress again that to me, this is not a threat to human interpreters. I think it's rather a way of expanding the market. And ideally, I mean, we always talk about how our goal is to break down language barriers, right? Well, then I think that should truly be the ultimate goal, and not to protect human interpreters at all costs. And I know that that is a bit of a controversial stance, but in the end, like, I'm not anti protecting human interpreters right now or anything. I'm just saying we shouldn't interpret for the love of interpreting. We should interpret to allow for language access. And if in some cases the machine can do that and bring it to places that we can't go, then why not, is my case. And also in some other cases, we've seen these hybrid solutions already where someone might start out with machine interpreting, realizes, well, this isn't good enough, I need a human, and then they can request a human at a click of a button. So again, isn't that potentially even adding more work for interpreters? So I don't think we always need to talk about replacing and human versus machine. Like, machine translation has been around for a long time now, and it's been used all the time in the market, and yet we still have a lot of translators.
And Sarah, this is very interesting, and I've been humbled more than once trying to compare what I came up with, and just sort of an idle exercise, trying to compare what I came up with for an intriguing piece of text, for example, trying to translate it, and comparing that to what Google Translate tells me I should use instead. And more than once, I had to admit that what I got out of Google Translate was better than what I could have, come up with myself. So there might be
Heresy.
heresy, but there might
Yeah.
be instances where, just given the amount of information and data that's out there, a machine would eventually have, in the fraction of a second, the ability to go over a collection of trillions of options when I am limited
Mhm.
in the few slots that I can reach out and check in, as long as it takes for me to speed up the next sentence. So we don't like to think about this, but there might be instances where the vocabulary is limited, where the setting is very forgiving, where again there's an urgency and so on, and where machines can actually, from being exposed to the same universe over and over, do a better job than we do. Would you agree?
Well, and when
Yeah.
Sarah mentioned language access, for example, um, I'm 100% with her. It is a need. And they are actually digitalizing rare languages.
Mhm.
Some languages they are dying are being digitalized in order to preserve them. So technology looking to our future, creating a new history. That is beautiful. As to yet, I'm sorry. I am an oracle right here, right now, this moment with you guys. I cannot really see the future. I'm sorry if I misled you, but I do believe in the word yet. And I believe, just like Sarah mentioned, there will be a moment when there will be no interpreters and translators exclusively. We're all going to be linguists working towards creating better language access technology. And I do believe that biotechnology is the key. Maybe neurolinguistics is going to start working with biolinguistics, and the companies that work with the development of these new technologies to assist us. And maybe in the 25th or 26th century, I mean, if I'm to believe what Jane Roddenberry said, it's not happening in the 23rd century. That's only two more to go, guys. 200 years in the future, they are not going to get there.
Well, if you think about how much has happened in the last 100 years or even 200 years, and how much technology, like the development, is accelerating,
Yeah.
that is, yeah. And I'm also agreeing with you with the yet, and we cannot know the future. But for me, that's part of the point also. Like, never say never. I would have said, yeah, we'll never be fully replaced. But then again, what do I know what the future holds
Yeah,
really in
and
terms of technology?
it's always exponential, right? It's not linear, right? looking back at the last 100 years, tell us little as to what the next 100 years are probably going to bring. So we have a lot of excitement to go through, and hopefully we will see part of that still in our lifetime. Right?
Well, if you listen to what Carl Schwab has to say, he's the CEO of the World Economic Forum. We are living through the fourth industrial revolution, and
Mhm.
what characterizes it is the volume, speed, and penetration of all the changes that are happening to us right now. That last word was wrong, but you understand what I mean. It's everywhere. The changes are happening everywhere. And it is happening so fast, at such a fast pace, that technologies are becoming obsolete. If you remember the little mini discs that were replaced by the CDs that
Yeah,
have now
yeah,
completely disappeared, I have a
yeah.
stack of 100 CDs here that I don't use. I don't need DVDs anymore. My
Yeah.
daughter was telling me when she was what? I think 15 years old, Mom, I was just looking at things today. We were organizing her bedroom. Robert, her cousin, my nephew, has no idea what a VHS tape is. He's never seen one.
Hmm.
5 years
Yeah.
difference between one and the other.
So if you show them a pencil and a cassette tape, they don't know what to do with it, right? To rewind the tape like this. Right?
Mm-mm. What is that thing?
Now, question to you, Sarah. Part of what I see happening out there, and guys, this is just a preamble so that we can get to your questions, right? So feel free to address us either coming here and showing on screen if that's possible. So, and again, this is just a preamble to your questions. I assume we have a few questions already on the chat here. I'm going to go over them in a minute. But the question I have to you, Sarah, is this: I was on the forefront. I was helping push this to the market, the RSI and so on,
Mhm.
even before the pandemic, because we founded KUDO and we were trying to get ready. But because I was coming from the UN, where there was a lot of pressure from delegates to say, "Hey, I can come from Burkina Faso 7 times a year to Geneva to sit at a 45-minute meeting. Please
Yeah.
find a way to make it happen so that I can chime in from where I am in French and be heard and interpreted and so on." So we were under pressure to come up with a system. And again, guys, the technology doesn't change because a bunch of techies wants to give it a try.
No.
It's because there's a new use case, right? Like in the
Hmm.
case I just described, or in the case of Nuremberg, where the trials had to go faster, and now because of the pandemic. But the question, and again, there was a lot of reluctance, right? Interpreters saying, not on my watch, this is not going to happen, it cannot happen, it's not happening. So a lot of denial there, a lot of reluctance, and so on. But eventually, the fact that we had technology and the fact that we had a system like KUDO and others to get us through was what allowed us to continue to have a living, no, a life.
Mhm.
So, do you now, from where you stand, sir, do you see this as a positive trend in the market? Do you think interpreters are better off today than they were? And is that a trend that is expected to continue or not? Or this was a sad turn of events?
Well, no, I think this was okay. I know I have to be careful with how I phrase my words here because I know that a lot of interpreters struggled and had, at least at the beginning of the infamous pandemic, a very hard time and lost a lot of their assignments. But I also know that a lot of it has come back. And I also received a bunch of remote interpreting requests myself. So I think that ultimately, like I said before, we're all coming out of this stronger. So I think ultimately that this is a good development because this is experience that is not going away again, right? And all these interpreters already knew how to interpret on site before. It's probably what they were trained for, like most of us. But on top of that, now they have acquired new skills. They probably have set themselves up with better technology. They know how to handle the online assignments now, and it has given them further reach. Basically, literally everyone has global reach now and access to assignments across the globe as well. If you're a conference interpreter, then you probably know this whole concept of usually you have your I can't even think of the term right now, but you basically have to name your home turf, and then you more or less just receive assignments in that area, or you have to charge different like travel costs.
Yeah,
Like
the domicile.
yes, the domicile. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. So, but that kind of goes out the window when things go remote, and there might be some controversy about that. At the same time, translators have never had that. So, why should interpreters really? Yeah, so that is a very long-winded way of saying that I think this is a positive development because everyone is set up better now. You have new skills. I think it was almost like a part of forced professional development, and it has opened the door to new clients as well. One thing I'm going to outline in the interpreting index in the full analysis is that interpreting has kind of gone a bit more mainstream in the last year now as well. So
I
it's no
want to
longer
have,
just, oh, sorry, in the traditional areas, but we're reaching clients that are completely new. Like, for example, this esports company that I mentioned that wants to do RSI all of a sudden. I mean, who would have thought the White House did a conference with RSI as well? So, and these are just two examples off the top of my head now, but there's more of them. And so, yeah, I think that interpreters, translators, and as well as the companies as well behind it, if you're working with agencies, or I want to say LSPs, we all will come out of this stronger because we had to adapt, and now we have more than before, and so do our clients. So there's more opportunities.
yeah,
Well,
I want
thank
to
you,
have a
Sarah.
go at that
What about
question.
working conditions, Gio?
Yeah,
What
I
about the
want,
working conditions?
okay. Um, Working conditions. Hmm. Things have changed a lot. And as far as I'm concerned, for us individuals, the working conditions are better when we think of as individuals. When you think of as business people, it is all over the spectrum. I've had colleagues who own agencies hire me to do a job with 4 hours of rehearsal, zero payment for the rehearsal because I'm home. I'll be doing nothing anyway, so why pay me? And another one wanted me to work for 2 hours straight. Oh, no, you're home, you can just do it. And the market needs to be better educated, a lot better educated. They are not taking into consideration all the expenses that we are going to incur. Like this baby here cost me almost $300.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my computer, brand new because I needed to get a better processor, more RAM.
Yeah.
I have to have a special protector for my eyes. My glasses, they have a special glare protection. Uh, all of these are expenses, and it needs to be reflected on my pay. It has to.
But we're also being asked to accommodate hourly rates, half-day rates, when in the past we were only, and in the afternoon, a different meeting somewhere else. So in
Yes.
principle, I could even double dip. But was that in your book and in the association with the colleagues that you represent a
Hmm.
welcome accommodation or um,
Look,
a quick fix that didn't really work for them?
I preach that. I preach that because I believe in that. We are here to serve a market. The needs of the market have changed, so we need to accommodate. Plus, mind you, I come from court interpreter, interpreting, medical interpreting, business meetings interpreting, and sometimes, or actually, court and medical is always by the hour. Some people want to pay by the minute now. Unbelievable. But yes, has always been by the hour. So for me, it was not a leap of faith. It was something that made sense. I am hired to do a job that's 45 minutes. Why am I going to charge half a day? The client's going to say, no, thank you. I actually was hired by a university for a 4.5 hours job. I charged my half a day rate, and the the client disagreed and offered an amount that was minuscule. because they're used to the medical, you know, and they pay very low in the medical field, medical interpreting. So that's what he wanted to pay. I said, no, thank you. This is my rate. We are talking about simultaneous interpreting. We are not talking about medical interpreting. And this is my rate. And I walked away from the project. I had brought 4 colleagues with me for Spanish and another one for Portuguese. 3 colleagues, right? So we were 4. They also walked away. I didn't say anything to them. We are independent contractors, and I was not representing them. But they also walked away because it was disrespectful what they were trying to do. They were not dealing with us as the professionals we are. So I do believe that we need to adapt. I talk about adapting pricing policies for both translation and interpreting. There's been a shift in the market. Even Naomi Bowman talked about that in one of the cafes that she used to hold in the beginning of the year. She talked about that, the shift in pricing strategies that's taking place right now. So it's a reality. We need to adapt to what's out there. I need to put food on my table, a roof over my head, keep my family dressed. So guess what? I will adapt to the demands of the market without disrespecting my needs. There has to be a dialogue. We have to come together.
So one thing, for example, that we've been trying to do at KUDO very, very much is this. The reality is changing, right? The ship has changed course. Insisting on doing things the old way is a mistake. We've seen this mistake made by colleagues. We've seen this mistake made by a few associations. Now everybody kind of realizes that, okay, this is here to stay. We got to go in a different direction. Let's try and adapt. But then the adaptation also comes in waves. And although we could be doing things in a different manner and so on, our effort has been to, okay, let's try to move forward and disrupt the market, because that's what we're doing, but trying to disrupt it as little as possible at every turn of the wheel, right? So because we need to give the profession time to adapt, right? So for example, when it comes to hourly rates, I don't like the concept of an hourly rate stacked on top of one another. So it's 1 hour, I give you so much, 2 hours, I give you that much. So, and again, we're trying to still salvage what's left of of the old system, in that if it's just 1 hour or 20 minutes, I pay you the hour. I mean, KUDO or anybody. If it's more than an hour, 65 minutes, then you're into half day rate. And now you can go all the way to 3 hours in principle. But I'm not going to ask you, I'm not just going to give you 1 hour and 30 minutes, so 1.5 hours, because you only work 90 minutes. No, you got your half day. Anything that goes beyond 3 hours, you're in full day territory. Now you get a full day's rate for anything beyond 3 hours and 10 minutes, let's say, or 3 hours, right? So we're trying to salvage that. The same goes with AI, right? We just now could have just now introduced captioning, right? And it got a bit controversial because, again, the way we're doing it is we're captioning what comes out of an interpreter's mouth, because we want to keep the interpreters in the game. We could be providing captioning, just doing machine translation, which is what some of the other platforms are doing. But we don't want this to be something that, again, is going to scare the interpreters away and say, oh, I see it coming. You see, they're trying this. Someday the machines are going to, plaster it all over the place just in text, and we're going to be replaced. No, we want to keep the interpreters in the loop. And then there's a whole set of adaptations. What about copyrights? What about this and what about that? And guys, the world is changing, right? We need to adapt, and there's always a trade-off here that we have to be very mindful of. So whenever we can, we try to slow the pace of what is possible to allow people to adapt. But eventually, that's not under our full control. We are here to serve the needs of a market. We, not just as companies, but we as interpreters. We are at the beck and call. We are at the mercy of our clients. Of course, interpreting is a form of art that, if it reaches a point where it's so low that everybody's now, racing to the bottom, I, as an interpreter, will find something better to do. I'm not going to just adapt to the lowest price ever, right? And we're trying to also sustain the rates up for as long as we can. But there is pressure on the prices. And it's not the RSI companies doing it. It's the world out there trying to cut corners to the best of their ability. And we're here to say, no, please stop. But again, there are limitations to what we can do. Do you think, Sarah, that this is a healthy way of moving technology ahead? Or should we be totally detached and say, you know what, let's take a look at what clients are asking. And if an hourly rate is what they want, let's push the hourly rate and, crucify me, right? I understand. What I'm doing is not to the best advantage of the interpreters, but this is what the market is doing. So far, we're trying to do the opposite. Is that healthy?
I find that is a really, really hard question to answer because, yeah, on the one hand, something we always kind of highlight at Nimdzi as well is that in the end, the market will decide. For example, when people are saying, "Oh, this technology isn't ready," well, if someone's buying it and using it, then, well, that's it, But when it comes to the rates, of course, I agree with Gio that there should be a conversation where both the market, so like the clients and the interpreters come together and somewhat meet each other in the middle. Because as you said, if it becomes a race to the bottom, then the good interpreters, they will leave. Yeah. And then you're back to just using anyone who's bilingual and not qualified, and might as well check yourself into a hospital, you're just brain dead, basically. So, I think there's a balance to be struck. I think I don't think I can fully answer what should be done, but I think you cannot expect to have the same exact system as we always had and that we had for on-site in the virtual realm for the reasons I mentioned. On the other hand, you can also not just accept whatever clients want. If it's like you said, Gio, we also need to, or interpreters and translators need to eat and have a roof over their heads and clothe their families. And plus, yeah, maybe another approach as well is to also stress the preparation that goes into assignments. Again, that is something we always did for on-site assignments.
That's important. The preparation time. It is not you call me now, I sit down and I do it. There is a whole preparation for me to get to that point where I can deliver what you expect. And sometimes, even if it's just 45 minutes, I still have to read the material. I still take an hour to 2 hours to read the material before I can sit down in front of my microphone to deliver it. So all of that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, I was finally able to see some of the chat here on my cell phone. And now, again, still didn't see a lot of questions, but I saw a lot of, endorsements for what some of you are saying and so on. So, and we'll have to go back and revisit those things. And Sarah, I'm sorry if I put you on the spot there. I understand now that some of the questions are hard to answer. Yes, that's why I pushed them over to you and didn't want to answer them.
I'm perfectly comfortable being uncomfortable.
Okay.
No problem.
So am I. At this point, I think we all have to.
Exactly. Let me illustrate some of what Sarah said with what happened to me. An agency wanted to argue my request for a full day because I was going to have a partner, and the partner would be speaking half of the time. Therefore, they should pay me only for half of the time.
Yeah,
well,
call for education right there.
Hey guys, if I can interrupt, we're scheduled to end this in 1 minute, which is cool. We can go as long as you want, but also LinkedIn event, LinkedIn, I love you. If you're listening, I love you. I support you. You gotta invest in your LinkedIn events. It's really buggy. So the stream, we got kicked off the stream, and now we're on a brand new stream. We're 2 minutes into a new stream in the same place, and 17 people have found us. So if you found us, if you left that old stream and came to this new stream, then I commend your commitment to the profession. But yeah, let's keep going. I'm here as long as you need me. So
this is, again, that's what you get when you gather a bunch of interpreters around any table, right? I want to be here
technical problems.
30 minutes.
You get technical problems. That's what you get.
No, we want to talk.
Go
You know,
over
we all talk too much, and that's
You
what
want to talk?
Keep going, guys.
attracted
Keep
us
going.
to the profession. So,
I'm gonna go back on
so
mute.
let me do this. Well, let me thank all of you who participated up until this point. Thank those of you who found us here. I'm one of them actually. I was able to come back on the news thing. That's why I didn't see the messages all of a sudden because they disappeared. Again, thank you all very much, and thank you, Sarah and Gio and so on. But I still have a few questions or a few things I want to, you know, pick your brains on. So if you are free to stay another 5 minutes, we can visit those things and then maybe end on a better note, if that's okay with you. Does that work for both of you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So about the preparation thing, the materials, right? Again, as a result, as a side effect of what we're seeing now, I see two things happening. Number one, interpreting with all the problems that RSI meant in terms of the disruption, in terms of how it rubbed people the wrong way in the beginning and so on. I think, and Sarah, tell me if I'm wrong, I think it increased the visibility of what we do. It increased the visibility of interpreting. More people now have been exposed to interpreting all of a sudden when in the past they had never heard somebody else's voice in a meeting than before. So it raises a few questions. It raises attention. It raises new prospects for the profession and so on. But as a side effect, so that's the good side. But as a side effect of all that, lead times to the meetings are shorter because now it's practical and people, well, okay, we can do this fast. Interpreters don't have to fly here. I don't have to get somebody into a hotel, which is going to take another half hour just to check these guys in and so on. We can do this one after the other, right? And as a result, we don't have as much time to prepare, right? So KUDO Marketplace, for example, we have limited, again, we even offer clients the opportunity to meet in 2 hours from now. Nobody has ever jumped on that because you don't plan a multilingual meeting for 2 hours from now. But we've had situations where people wanted to meet in 6 hours from now. And depending on how dense the whole subject matter is, it's a lot on the interpreter. So what we're doing is also, again, going back to technology and using AI, for example, to help expedite how you prepare for an event. So let's get all the glossaries, all the links, everything that's out there, put it together in a bilingual glossary that I can give you for a fraction of the time that it would otherwise take you to prepare and do it yourself by hand. Does that solve all the problem? No, it doesn't. Does that help? Definitely does, right? So I guess our first stop, our first effort should be to use technology in such ways, so as to aid the interpreters in what they do. When we reach that limit, then we're going to go on to something else. Like we're now working on a virtual booth. I'm interpreting. I don't have a colleague by my side, but I have the machine suggesting, oh, confirming the numbers, confirming the titles, confirming people's names with a funny spelling, doing the conversions of units of measurement for me, so I don't have to do the math in my head. And well, in the past, I had someone doing those calculations for me, and so on. So we're doing all we can, guys. Don't think of us as the evil forces that are trying to push technology down and push you out of the market. That's the last thing we want. I'm one of you guys, and we are all part of this, but we have to make it work with the tools that we have, right?
Wow,
Sarah, again, a rambling, I didn't even ask a question, but I would love
no,
to hear
look,
your ideas on this.
you are the modern cars, the Formula One that is no longer restricted to the racers. It's available to the public now. That's the way I see it. I am absolutely grateful for technology for allowing me to grow in my profession. Number one, expose myself more to a wider public, learn much faster. And there's so much, just terminology extraction tools. Man, it helps you get ready for meetings in a jiffy. The AI with the conversions also assist a lot. Learning numbers. There is a thing on the internet, numberology. I don't remember right now, but it's a site you can go in and you can practice numbers in different languages, and you can speed it up, slow it down. It is awesome. Numbers, oh my gosh, ooh, they're a problem for me.
Especially
So,
in French,
anyways,
when
yeah,
it's actually a mathematical exercise, right? You got to be doing the math as you go. Right?
yeah, technology is here to help. And yes, in some cases it will, just as it has over time, replace the bicycle, replace the horse, the bicycle, etc., etc. It might one day replace us. But I do not see, because of the type of work we do, the artistic part of what we do, I do not see technology replacing us 100%, not even in the 25th century, unless they have our brains connected directly to the equipment, and then we don't even have to speak. It just goes, telepathically from one brain to the other.
Indeed, indeed. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm definitely a big supporter of the technologies you described, because this whole idea of speeding up the glossary creation, and especially the unit conversions, because they are just such a pain in the ass, I have to say, and I find them really difficult. I'm sorry, I said the Germans don't mind swearing as much in public as the people in the US, I think. So sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, the conversions, especially, they were really, really tough. So I think that is just a improvement. I don't see why that would ever be considered a threat, to be honest. As far as the short time before assignments goes, that you mentioned at the very beginning, Evandro, um, yeah, I would say that that is really hard for interpreters. Then, of course, it can also vary what kind of assignments you're getting. I mean, if you have to interpret for the heart surgeons congress or whatever, then yeah, I think you need more prep time than 6 hours. But realistically, they will give you more time than that as well. Whereas if it's maybe just your average I don't know, team meeting
Yeah,
of some corporation, it might be
Yeah.
doable. So
it's
it
a
really
good point.
depends there.
That's a very
Yeah.
good point, Sarah. And the way we fix this in KUDO is, as an interpreter, when you check into KUDO Marketplace, you have two groups of subject matter expertise areas, right? So you can say, okay, primary areas of expertise include, let's say, multilateral meetings, or finance. And secondary areas include heart surgery. So I can do heart
Mhm.
surgery, but you got to give me more time,
Yeah.
right? So in that way, if it's fast, I'm not going to count you in for the heart surgery, but I'm going to count you in for accounting and finance, right?
Hmm.
This was actually,
I've done hysterectomies and
Wow.
bladder surgeries and tumor what we call extractions from the ovaries, and back surgeries. I've done all that, guys.
you
Wow.
mean you've done interpretation of that, I hope.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Lo, yes, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah. But
But yeah,
and
and sorry, just something to add as well, that even though, I mean, that sounds a little like I'm just glossing over it, but I'm not. But it's just an additional point, is that I think the world has gotten so much faster anyway. Yeah. So basically, most of my friends that I talk to, and we're all in very, very different professions, we're all just like, oh, I need to get this done fast, and there's another deadline here, and I have to have this and this done fast, and the clients want more at the same price in a shorter amount of time. And so I think this whole drive towards everything needing to be faster and more like instant almost, is something that is not just affecting our profession. It is where the world is heading right now.
yeah. Well, thank you both very much. And I want to end on one final reflection, and that's a reflection on quality. Behind what we're trying to, again, the many things we're discussing here is the notion of quality. Right? There are many levels of good enough that you can, shoot for, and they, as Sarah said in the beginning, they're going to be okay to a few clients depending on where you are. KUDO understands interpreting and tries to, again, position itself in the market as a premium interpretation solution. We're not for everyone. We're not catering to all the clients, and we make it very clear to our clients. So we're still in that niche where we can say, I want the best interpreters. I want to compensate them fairly, and I want to provide all that we can in order to have quality interpretation, right? So the whole notion of quality is one that we sustain, is one that we shoot for, and we will continue to do that for as long as it's necessary and for as long as there's a market for it. Now, that's not to say that the market is not changing. And again, we might come to a point where we would need to also go to tier 2 and tier 3 and so on and so forth. But as we do that, I want to go back to Einstein and say, let us do this, because we're here to celebrate the International Day of Translation. So I don't want us to lose track of that. And Jerome and the whole thing that goes with it. So I wanted to go back to that notion of all the animosity that's usually there when we talk about these things is mostly unnecessary. So I would appeal to you that we can be more collaborative and build bridges rather than build walls. That's my last message to you on this important day where we celebrate our profession, a noble, beautiful profession that's moving forward despite all the changes that we have had in the recent and distant past. So I'll leave it here, and I would love to hear your reflections as well, Gio and Sarah. Let me start with you, Sarah.
Okay, sure. A tiny little bit about my super brief about my childhood in this regard, because so my grandmother was very good at languages. And so when World War II ended, she was like 13 years old. So she would have seen, watched a lot of the, well, it was a time where conference interpreting became more prominent, right? And this whole time where we in the profession always talk about the interpreters being kind of prominent figures as well. So she loved the idea of becoming an interpreter, and she talked to me about it all the time. She never made it because it was the 50s, but she was very good at languages and kind of passed that love for languages down to me as well, I think. So I've always had an admiration for interpreters and translators as well, which was part of the reason why I went in that direction as well, because I wanted to see if I could be part of this group of people that I admire so much. And then reading about it, interpreters were on the side of kings and pharaohs and throughout history before like our modern world today, where everything is kind of set up in the way that there are interpreters, and we have these people that connect us across nations and help governments communicate, to help like to run the globe together basically. It was always like individuals that traveled with the big politicians or enabled communication. So basically translators and interpreters have been part of bringing the world closer and being that bridge across nations and cultures for a very long time. And I think nothing is more important than putting yourself in the shoes of another culture and another language, going abroad, meeting people from other cultures. This sounds really cheesy, but I really think that is the best way towards eventually ending conflicts as well between us and moving forward together. So this is kind of the back part of and something to keep in mind when we just look at the market developments every day. And yeah, it's a good thing to be mindful of how important this job is. And I think despite the challenges of the last year, that there's still a bright future. As same as you said, Ewandro, more people have become aware of this type of service again. Interpreters are no longer just in the background, silent voice. Well, silent voices makes no sense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The ghost in the post.
Invisible voices.
Exactly,
Yeah.
invisible voices.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm very excited to see what the next phase looks like. Of course, we all have our projections, but I'm really excited to see what comes next, because I think that this can really be a new era for interpreting as well.
Excellent, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Gia.
I do like the idea of switching professions from ghost to engineer. Yeah, that is cool. We do build bridges. We bring communities together. Are you both familiar with Red T,
Mm-hmm.
the institution?
Yeah.
Right. Their website, their very first page there really moved me. Protect translators, protect interpreters, protect the world. Because that's what we do when we bring cultures together, when we bring people together, when we make ideas readily available in languages people can understand. We are uniting this planet and finally taking steps to making it one community. And that is necessary. Maybe I am too much of a romantic. I don't know. But I do believe that it is a calling. It's not only a profession, it has to be a calling because it's not easy. We go through a lot of strife. I recall traveling 5 times a month. And my husband would look at me and say, "Okay, baby, are you sure this is your address?" Because it was away so much more than at home. And that was uncomfortable. So being able to do my job from home for me, it's a pleasure. Yes, I miss traveling, but this change is not something that I have negative feelings about. On the contrary, I welcome that. And when I travel now, I don't only see the airport and the hotel, I get to see the city when I get back to traveling. So these are changes that do not affect the quality of the work we do, the inherent features of the work we do. We're still delivering in another language coherently, intelligently, the message that was delivered. That's our job, and we're still doing it. It doesn't matter if I'm in Japan, in Miami, or in Africa, in Jupiter, for that matter. I'm still doing my job, and that's what counts. And you're paying me for the job I'm doing, not for where I am. That should not be part of the equation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Gio. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tucker, for all the work you did backstage,
Well,
trying to compensate for my lousy mic
wait,
and everything
wait till
else.
you
And
see the
thank
recording.
you to Multilingual
Yep.
Media for making that possible.
Yeah, wait till you see the recording before you thank me too much. Thank you guys for helping out with this through technical difficulties. Thank you to chat who stayed with us as well. We had a really good retention. We had about 50 people join, and at the end we had about 50 people until LinkedIn kicked all of them off. But 20 of them found their way back to this new stream.
Yeah.
So kudos to you guys for being resourceful.
And again, this was also on Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth. So again, I hope this has been a positive message to the community of interpreters. The other day, talking to a colleague of ours who was here in KUDO with me, very awesome, he said, Ewandro, interpreting is the function of 3 C's. Conquest, conversion, and commerce. And I found that to be very insightful. And I wanted to add another C to the mix, and that's the C of change. We're always going to be there when things change, are about to change, or have just changed. That sometimes affects our own profession, and that's what we're living through. And I hope you are as resilient as the 20 people who finally found a way to be here and hear and start, and that we can move forward as one. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you.
Thank you, Ewandro.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ewandro. Thank you, Tucker. Ciao.